Are you curious about what yoga looks like off the mat, or keen to hear how yogis all around the world live? This show will let you in on the secret that there's no such thing as a perfect yogi. Welcome to the Plant-Powered Yoga Podcast. Please welcome your host, yoga teacher, coffee lover, vegan, and known as the Plant-Powered Yogi, Jess Ivers. Hello yogis, and welcome to another episode of the Plant-Powered Yoga Podcast. My name is Jess. Thank you so much for tuning in. This week's episode is a short and sweet one on a couple of things that I've noticed teachers saying over my years of practice during a class that maybe are a little inaccessible or even slightly inappropriate to be saying during a class. And this is potentially something that's come about for me over time as learning new ways to speak and to use different vocabulary during classes. But unfortunately, there's a lot of teachers out there that still use these. So I hope if you are a teacher listening and you notice yourself saying this, then hopefully you can make some slight adjustments. And if this is what's of interest to you, you might even want to go back and listen to the second last episode of season 1, episode 13, that I did on yoga vocabulary, and even the last episode, episode 19, with Claire from Chair Yoga Australia. Some of those is where a lot of this touches on language and the things that we say during class that can affect people in different ways. So yeah, if you want to go back and listen to those before listening to this one or afterwards. Now, we all know that in yoga, breath is one of the really big components. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. Pranayama is one of the 8 limbs, and we know that it's such a big part of a yoga practice that you incorporate that so much. Usually at the start of the class, there's a little pranayama practice, or you'll take some time to sit and focus on the breath. But one thing I really don't love is when teachers will say, just breathe through it, as if our breath can magically fix anything. And that to me is something where if you're in pain in a pose or something just doesn't feel right, that someone saying to you, just breathe through it, can be quite traumatic in a way, and that it's almost forgetting about what's actually happening. So it's almost desensitizing to the fact that, yeah, you might be in pain or you might be feeling uncomfortable in a shape. And instead of being like, hey, okay, let's back out of that a little and see how that feels, or let's change something, it's like, just breathe through it. You know, you can do this. You're stronger than that. Just breathe through it. Like, that's what your breath is for, and that's what we practice for. And it almost becomes this really aggressive tone of just breathe through it and you'll be fine. Like, basically, if you can't breathe through it, then, well, sorry, but you're not good enough. So that's something that I really wish teachers wouldn't say. And maybe instead of saying just breathe through it, maybe we can say, this is a time to focus on your breath, but if anything is feeling uncomfortable or if anything is feeling painful, listen to your body and back away from the shape, or maybe alter something else. But know your breath is there and keep listening to that too, but also keep listening to your body. Which I guess leads into the no pain, no gain. And look, that's not a super common one that I hear in class, but you might hear that in a really strong class or a power yoga class, where something that's meant to be strong or something that, yeah, again, is meant to feel like it's meant to hurt to be working. And that's one of the reasons why I love yoga so much, is it because there's no part of it that you should be hurting just to get an outcome. And, you know I've mentioned before that one of the greatest things that someone's taught me is that yoga is a great place to practice life. And yeah, sure, when things can be really painful in life, you can grow out of it, but it doesn't mean we have to put ourselves through that. So again, like the breathe through it, if something's hurting, that means something's wrong. That doesn't mean you're doing something right, or it doesn't mean that if you just sit there a little bit longer and really force your hip into a pose or stay in a side plank without modifying, that you're going to have some breakthrough or you're going to have some enlightenment moment during class. if something is painful, please just stop. So again, if you're a teacher that kind of goes with that thing and you might be a bit of a gym bunny and be really into that, just know that people don't come to a yoga class, or most people don't come to a yoga class to feel pain. And I don't think anyone should ever walk into a yoga studio or a yoga class and have to feel pain just to feel like they've gained something out of the class. And then I guess on the other hand is when teachers might refer to something as an easy shape. And I've probably been guilty of this in my time as a teacher, especially early on, thinking this pose or this shape's super easy. Like it's, and even the fact that Sukhasana is sometimes referred to as easy pose of just sitting. Sometimes sitting can be really uncomfortable or really difficult for some people, and it shouldn't be referred to as easy. So I guess referring to any shape or any pose or any movement going, this is a really easy flow, or this is a really easy pose to come to, knowing that everyone's body is different and it might not be easy for everyone. So some alternatives to that, I guess, is saying this is quite a simple movement, or this is quite a simple shape, but listen to your body, listen to what it's saying, and you just move in a way that feels good for you. And often in a yoga practice, you'll hear teachers refer to, if you want to deepen your pose, you can do this. Or if you want to go deeper, you can do this. So it's like adding on the levels. So you might be in a Vrikshasana or tree pose, and you might be just hanging out today with your heel on your ankle and keeping both feet on the ground. You might want to take your foot up a little higher to your shin, or you might want to take your foot all the way up to your inner thigh. But saying to someone who's got their foot on the floor, if you want to go deeper, you can bring your foot up to your thigh. Again, that's not up to us to judge how deep someone can go in a shape. Much like referring to something as easy, something I might think is quite easy for me might be the hardest thing that person's done in their whole yoga practice ever. Much like referring to someone, if they want to go deeper, they might not know what that means, and they actually might not know what their level of deepness is. If they've been in a situation where they're hyper flexible and they can hyperextend their limbs, and they might actually not have any awareness of how their muscles work. And so if you're saying to them in Trikonasana, triangle shape, oh, if you want to go deeper, you can bring your hand to the floor, they might have no concept of how their limbs or how their muscles, their ligaments, and all of their insides work, and therefore maybe actually putting themselves in danger by doing that. So instead of saying if you want to go deeper, or if you want to deepen your pose here as well, it's that thing of making it sound like it's some sort of hierarchical thing that's the end goal. The end goal is to be able to put your hand on the ground in Trikonasana. So instead of saying that, you can say, here are some options. These are the ones you can choose from today, and just knowing where you're at. Because every day on the mat can be different. It's not about deepening, it's all about experiencing. And this one's kind of a random one, but it's just always something that I've just found really unusual, is that you've probably heard 100 times when you're moving from a lunge shape back to a plank, or moving back from a lunge to a downward facing dog, anything where you need to get your foot from the front of the mat back to the back of the mat, is without sliding your foot on the mat, bring your foot back, or without scraping your foot. I actually have never really understood that, because everyone's bodies are made so differently that you might have shorter arms, longer arms, shorter legs, whatever it may be, that might not actually be possible for you. And I remember being in a class once where someone said that, a teacher said that, and then obviously there was an audible noise when people were stepping back, and almost gave this as if we were such a disappointment. And I just kind of want to, this is just me having a little bit of getting on my soapbox a bit about this, but it's okay to make noise on your yoga mat. It doesn't have to be done silently. And it's much like if you're balancing on something and you have a little bit of a stumble or a fall, you can have a little laugh. Like, don't take it so seriously. It doesn't have to be so serious all the time. And I feel like without sliding your foot on the mat as you step back is just making it almost a rigor or just something that has to be so done by the T that if you don't do it that way, then again, well, sorry, but you're never reaching enlightenment. It's kind of like being able to touch your toes. You know what? It doesn't matter if you can, it doesn't matter if you can't. If you do slide your foot on your yoga mat when you're practicing, nothing bad is going to happen. And so ends my little chat about little things in yoga that sometimes grind my gears about the way that we say things. And I guess it all just comes down to yoga vocabulary and the way that you speak about shapes, about people. And I think it's just a bit of a reality check for yoga teachers that we're in our body and the people that come into our classes are in their own bodies, and everyone's feeling it in a different way, and we can't ever predict how something is going to feel for someone, or we can't tell them how it should be feeling. So acknowledging that and using and thinking about different ways that you might be able to say something to people without potentially saying something that's inaccessible or even inappropriate to someone. Thank you so much for listening to this week's short and sweet episode. I'm excited to bring to you another interview next week with Leonie Lockwood, one of Melbourne's most wonderful yin teachers who has a wealth of knowledge about the body and about poses and shapes, and it was a really awesome chat and great time to catch up with her. So looking forward to sharing that with you next week. If you have any questions, any feedback, let me know. Contact details below. If not, have a wonderful week and I'll see you again soon. I'd like to acknowledge that the recording of this podcast took place on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and in acknowledgement of the lands, waters and skies upon which I live, work, play and practice.
Thanks again for listening to the Plant Powered Yoga podcast. For more information, visit plantpoweredyoga.com or visit the show notes below. I'd love it if you could rate, review, or even share this podcast with a friend. Thanks so much for helping create a kinder world, and see you next time.